Do you like DIY?
Well, look,
How are you with that?
How are you with that?
Not bad.
Let
Let me say that.
What's
Not bad. Let me talk about my DIY history.
Yeah.
I built a pergola. Is it called pergola? Pergola.
I don't know what that is.
Well,
Is it an outdoor swing?
it's a glorified frame. So you know those frames that are linked as like a square, and then you hang hanging baskets off them, and they're big in the suburbs.
And you built one.
I built one of those.
I assembled.
I was 5.
Still chief among your achievements.
It's on my CV. It was pretty good. But I quite like DIY. I like making things.
Well, I've had to almost entirely overhaul my entire personality in middle age because I'd dedicated my early life to the pursuit. I don't know if you noticed, because you were busy living your own life, but to the pursuit of celebrity, and so I've sort of like zealously bought into the worst aspects of the ideals of our age.
I mean, I don't know the full story.
How could you?
Exactly. Walk a mile in my shoes. But I'm aware that you were in papers.
Yes, that's what I was being.
with frequency. But I mean, who's to say why exactly that was?
That's right, because we aren't responsible for the way that we're received and subsequently rendered in secondary media. And I think a lot of the mental illness we see from people in our, should we call it an industry or should we call it a game, that
frolic
in our frolic is because of being dominated or hypnotized by what happens in that sort of secondary media space, and you deal with it really interestingly. Firstly, I'll say something disarmingly kind to you.
I thought you were going to say badly, and I would have gone along with that. It felt like you went, the fence had the word bad on, and you went, interesting, which I think was kind. That was kind. So this won't be your first act of kindness.
Here comes the second.
Okay, thank you.
I admire you. I think you're doing really, really interesting things. I think you're brilliant.
Well, you're kind to
and
lie.
Lovely.
You're kind to lie.
What are you? Quite modest and shy, really. What have you become an entertainer for then?
How I never entertained anyone in my life. I mean, people. Generally, I'd advise people to tune me out, but I don't feel I've entertained people. I mean, genuinely, as in most things I've done, people have gone, no more of that, please. That's been the feeling I've had, and quite rightly. So I think, and in a way, I mean,
you're really English.
And yet, that seems odd. Yeah, because my parents weren't. But, Englishness is quite strange, isn't it? What do you feel Englishness is to you? Because I don't quite know what it is.
Well, this is an interesting time to assess it. But when I use it to describe you there, I think that you're being sort of modest and disarming. But I know that you are fiercely intelligent, and I've seen you be eviscerating on the television. So I know that there's an aspect of you that is, I feel that perhaps you are cautious around sincerity, and that's an assessment I'm making from your brilliant work with like the Garth Marenghi stuff. It was like sublime irony, and I think that you and Matt Berry, your sort of performance styles there, like I thought it was really innovative and unusual for people to be so brazenly discordant and to disregard conventions around acting, even comic acting, so flagrantly and brilliantly.
Well, you're kind to say. I mean, I certainly had the gift of being terrible already. So in a way, I don't feel anyone wants to be funny as the first thing they do in any way. That generally, Brad Pitt, that's not the first thing he needs to try to do. He can just be handsome and charming, and that's a good life. I generally think that what I found funny is people really trying to be serious in a way, and just people laughing. That's all. I think your people work out there's something not right with you, and they start laughing, and you go, if I pretend that I decided that you're going to laugh at me, that might be better. And so with that show, I don't know. I've never spoken about that show out of character in an awful way, because we did all of our press in character as these two. So yeah, it's, I don't want to presume anyone knows what it is. It's just like a spoof horror show in a certain way, written by this pompous horror writer. And so whenever we did interviews about the show, which we did in Edinburgh, we did them as Garth and his publicity manager, because it seemed too much to do a show about people pompously talking about how great they are, and then do interviews talking about how, in a way, great you were for coming up with this thing about people being pompously great. As in, it seemed a bit too snake eating its own tail, and also just, I don't know, it just didn't seem like it would be fun or interesting to talk about in that way. So a lot of that show, I think, harnessed our own limitations that we had.
Possibly that's true of even declared and overt great artists. Perhaps all of us are, by definition, ultimately, it's our limitations that...
I suppose, yes. I mean, I've been reading Somerset Maugham and Moon and Sixpence. Have you read that?
No.
It's really interesting. I think it's based on the life of Paul Gauguin, and about this stockbroker type person in Paris who just one day decides to become a painter at 40, and just seems to completely change personality and is utterly uncompromising. And he ends up being this genius, and everyone just thought, you're crazy for doing this, but he's brilliant and he's totally amoral. And I think I'm interested in someone who does that and just is not that good. That seems a more interesting story in a way to me. Like, you just go, no, I'm going to be a painter, and everyone goes, you shouldn't be a painter, and then at some stage going, yeah, I shouldn't have been a painter. That seems, I don't know, there's something funny about failure in that way. So yes, I always found it interesting, people really reaching for something and missing, because that's just what most experience, I think, is sort of missing. It's a misalignment, isn't it? Of some kind.
I think you're right, but perhaps the way that we construct like a perfect resolution, like say perfectionism, in itself is, if not arbitrary, it's impossible to fulfill, and not only because of the requirements of the word perfect, but also because I don't think that whenever you arrive in those places, it never feels fulfilling. I'm interested that you're more fascinated by mediocrity than genius, because I like that story of when people inadvertently happen upon genius, like in Bullets Over Broadway, the Woody Allen film, or like in Mozart, in Amadeus, like that genius might just visit sort of vulgar genius.
Yes, and it can be over there, and yes, this cultivated person who feels like they should have, they just don't have it. And I mean, Woody Allen, I think that he does believe that there is such a thing as genius, and some people just born with it. He doesn't think you can become funny, I think. Yeah,
and you feel like that. The reason that you moved into sort of parody, like these sort of brilliant parody, but parodic, like scripted comedies like Garth Marenghi and that rock opera thing you've done, like lots of stuff, and the Dean Lerner chat show, is because you felt that that's what you did anyway, those kind of performances, because it is masterful in a way, like to do something. It's like, say, Dave Shrigley, those the illustrations of Dave Shrigley. Just because something looks simple and basic, that doesn't mean that it's easy to achieve. And I've seen, again, with, when you have won awards for playing Moss in IT Crowd, you say like, it's just by happenstance I'm incapable of expressing emotion. I'm a membrane that Graham Linehan pushes stuff through. It's interesting. I suppose that makes me think you must be a very self-assured man.
I don't think I am. More, as in I wouldn't know, as in I wouldn't be closed to that being the case, but that doesn't feel like that from this side of the machine.
Do you mean you worry?
Worry, yeah, I don't know. not so much worry, but as in more that I just know that I'm not so good at things, and that's okay. But it doesn't. I don't think that worries me too much. But that's partly because a lot of the people I really like are beyond what I would be interested in doing. You know, they're so great that there's no disgrace in not being as good as Velasquez. You just go, that's okay. That's just, I don't look at that and go, oh mate. I just go, okay, great. But I mean, those shows, I mean, I had no interest in horror whatsoever before doing that show. And so in a way, it was through Matt Holness being interested in horror and that, and coming, and I always felt I was sort of more just operating as a fan of the people in the show and doing my, contributing to that. And my interest was in the gap between intention and execution. I mean, Susan Sontag was saying this thing about her book, Notes on Camp. Why are certain things seen as, and I guess this was written in when was it written? The 60s maybe? So it had a different idea maybe of what we currently see camp as being. But somehow that there's you can tell what the intention of a work of art is versus how it's been realized. And if there's a kind of dissonance between those two, there's something enjoyable about that. There's something enjoyable. I mean, I have always liked, say, blaxploitation films. And there's something enjoyable about the scope, about social commentary, trying to really go into an area, trying to really change things ostensibly, but really it's people running along dots and flares with kind of wah-wah music. And the dissonance between some quite lofty ideas and the housing of it just can be quite funny and pleasurable. And in a way, I suppose, to take the example of someone doing something and it not turning out so well, I guess what it shows is the wrong intention, that there's an intention to be great. And that isn't a good intention, because what is that? You should be interested in the thing and who knows what it will be. But to deliberately shoot for something and you can see that wasn't quite the thing, I mean, the very basic example is just someone really winding up for a penalty and missing. There's something just, the whole drama, the build-up, the kind of self-importance, the seriousness, the spotting, and then just missing. There's something, and I don't think it's just a kind of, look at them mocking thing. It's just that's what life is.
Yeah, it's beyond Schadenfreude and even bathos, but it's the inability of human beings to at least consistently be beautiful or to be magical.
Yeah, exactly. Just how silly sometimes just occupying space. This is ridiculous. What is this? And it's I feel really warmly to things that would be considered not maybe campy or schlocky. I sort of feel closer to the people who make those things than people who feel quite slick, like Michael Bay or someone. I go, I just can't see that a person made this. I have no connection to it. Whereas I really like Ed Wood, Plan 9 from Outer Space. I really feel in some way connected to that film.
Yeah, the fallibility, the aiming and missing, you find that beautiful. Hey, what do you think did you see when Grayson Perry did those 3 documentaries on class and taste?
Oh, right, yeah, I saw the Tapestry exhibition in Bristol, so I haven't seen the shows, but I saw that, which I thought was brilliant. I loved them, and the kind of progress of class and the bowls and it was amazing. I thought it was great.
He was saying that that sort of the lower down the sort of social hierarchy you are, the more likely your taste is going to be overt and bling and gaudy, and becoming subtler as it sort of as you have more access to wealth or status or whatever. Yes. But the thing that was I thought very interesting was a bit where he said, like, they had footage of a woman at a working men's club somewhere, presumably in the north, where a man was singing like a Delilah or whatever,
right?
And she was sort of like pissed and at the front and like crying.
Yeah.
And Grayson Perry in the commentary says like that, how is that different from someone at Tosca having that much? How are we? And I wonder, do you think it's somehow to do with this idea of well executed intention? Is camp and kitsch is about, we understand reference A is the aspiration to some kind of form of recognizable or classical greatness, and the secondary component is that this is a sort of a bundled together measurable mess. You can sort of see how it's not achieved.
Well, I think it operates across class in that Art Deco is quite camp, you know, it's got a sort of lifelessness, a kind of sort of weird, I mean, take all that Burne-Jones stuff that Andrew Lloyd Webber quite likes. It's quite sort of camp, and, you know, there's certain operas that feel like that, and, you know, The Fool do not seem camp, you know, in terms of, it doesn't feel like they're going for something and they've missed it. It's more your own, it's just showing your own hubris, maybe it's that. It's kind of, you see what someone's reaching for versus what they're actually doing. And I guess that's an interesting thing to see. I mean, Aaron Sorkin, he's always kind of going, well, drama's just intention, obstacle. So in a way, in that sense, the intention is, which I think is a silly intention, greatness, and the obstacle is you. You know, and so that's kind of a funny, dramatic thing to see somehow. You know, like, Bullets Over Broadway, it's just, I want to write this great play, but I have to cast this person who's got a terrible, or Sing in the Rain. That's just the great thing. We want to do this musical. We now want sound, but the film star from the silent era who's now going to be speaking has got this terrible voice. And so this is going to make that film funny because she's all grateful and there's this voice coming out. It's the attention there that's fun.
Without leaping into Jung, do you reckon that that's resourced from the peculiar fusion of the simian and the divine, that somehow within us there is that aspiration to be whole and holy and beautiful, and yet the sort of gastric fluctuations and snot and stumbling that being human.
The bladder that must be drained, you know, that's Nabokov's phrase, you know, the pencil that must be sharpened, the bladder that must be drained. Just that continual bodily limitations, and but also it's also people not being okay with it. Like, why can't you be okay with your sort of limitations and your fleshliness, your creatureliness in a certain way? And so maybe it operates both ways. Maybe it's not that we should be reaching there and we're falling short. It should be also, this is also a place that can be occupied in a fine way.
Don't you think it's because...
And they're not too polar. It's not like this is good, this is bad, or whatever. You know?
Well, I reckon to refer to some of your earlier ideas, say like Michael Bay, it's like we acknowledge there's an external metric. This is what greatness looks like. Yeah. And people that are great seem to unconsciously be able to realise that without reference to, and here I'm now striving for greatness, it just flows through them. And the sort of kitsch or camp or bad art is aware of that and is aspiring to this external thing. Now, and I reckon there's a correlation between that and the civilizing influences that are, you know, primarily about the denial of our baser bodily natures, our appetites, our drives that reveal generally our sort of
in a sort of id superego kind of way, as in the stuff that comes out in dreams. Is that what you mean?
Yes, and I mean that as long as
this is the most eye contact I've ever been involved with in my life. I mean, normally the eyes would only have got up to here after 20 minutes, but I'm really trying to focus here.
You're doing so well.
I'm pretending to be a person.
You're really pulling it off, Richard. No one knows.
The
it's
algorithm's
only you that
working
knows.
very well.
It's a triumph, this algorithm.
I will feed this back to my programmers.
Tell them that this is, I would say, the summit. Use this as a template for future
appearance. If I start puking milk in a way, then you'll know it's got too stressful, the intimacy. But so far,
we can even amend that. So the bit where he vomited lactose.
Yeah, just cut that out.
Don't do that in your next venture.
Exactly.
It's a simple and obvious problem that if we could just eliminate. He probably did a bit too much eye contact in retrospect.
Too much.
That was the last thing he was talking about. He was talking about eye contact.
Too much too soon.
Loads of milk.
Yeah. The hydraulic fluid just came spurting out.
Seems like a natural point to change the subject a bit. So you've written this book then?
Yes.
Ayoade on top. And it's what is it?
That's a good question.
Do your research.
Yes. No, it is. Well, this is what it is. And I don't have a pitch for it, which is a problem. It is really about a film called View from the Top, which is a Gwyneth Paltrow air stewardess comedy that came out in 2003. My wife and I saw this film, and never has a film baffled me more at each stroke of its existence. And it seemed so amazingly poor, given the elements, that I thought, what would happen if you pretended that everyone stood behind every decision in this film? And so to treat this film like it's Citizen Kane and write about it, write a serious analysis of this film as though it's the greatest thing that has ever been recorded. Because, I mean, it's a cliche, no one sets out to make a bad film. But I definitely think there are films where, this might not be so good.
Yeah.
But in a way...
What was the problem with On Top?
This is the thing. It felt that everyone was filming it on their way to something else. In a certain way. You felt that the first question was, how long will this last? And then... okay, I can maybe fit this in. There's so many things. Gwyneth Paltrow plays a blue-collar person. So she plays someone who grew up in a trailer park. So there's that.
Is she not able to successfully deliver the idea that she's from that trailer park?
It doesn't seem...
in her demeanour.
She doesn't alter her demeanour greatly, but it's hard to fathom exactly... I mean, who knows what the decisions were, but it's a spirited performance in a certain way. And she's very dignified, and she's got a sort of dignity, and I think she's sort of it's almost she's known for this aspirational pep, but I think that the thing that she's good at is being disillusioned and slightly unwilling to participate. She's really good in Royal Tenenbaums, I think. She's quite good at being surly and sort of unwilling to be present, in a way. And so for her to look like she really wants also what is a relatively low-level goal for a Gwyneth Paltrow type, which is to become an air stewardess, seems odd. And also it feels incredibly patronising. Here's the main thing that I found... strange about the film. I feel that there's a trope in comedies at the moment, and there has been for a long time, whereby you have a career-driven person, and at some stage, towards the end of Act 2, they have to decide, look, I really do want to spend more time with Chad. I need to go to his piano recital because it means a lot to him, and I can't just... Yes, the Yamamoto Corporation are on my back, and I've got to get this presentation in, and my boss has been on my ass for a long time about this, and I'm going to lose my job, and there's this guy who's coming up. But family's more important, and I'm going to go to that recital, and Chad is going to really like... I always change his name to Bobby. It's almost as if they could be interchangeable. It's going to play really well at that piano recital, and we're going to hug, and we're going to know that was the best thing. And then at that moment, the boss will say, hang on, that idea that we rejected on page 10 is actually really good, and so now you're going to have a promotion. And it feels that there's essentially a thing in films whereby we, the audience, are being hugely patronised as people going to see these films, which are expensive, and being told to give up jobs at the same time, as if there's a kind of inherent phoniness to any activity that isn't creative. Because also, that film does not work if the guy is a brain surgeon. There's no film where it says, stop the cancer research, you've got to spend more time here.
Because of Chad's piano recital. And have a more laissez-faire attitude to brain surgery.
Exactly.
Lighten up.
And there's a sense of, we the filmmakers, who obviously haven't seen our families while we're making the film about how you need to spend more time with family, we're involved in creative things, and that's really important. But you, the quotidian, living out these kind of small lives, don't get too involved in the unimportant things. And it just doesn't feel that anyone doing it believes that. I just don't... It just doesn't feel truthful, and it doesn't feel sort of rigorous enough on the actual price you pay, I think, for being involved in relationships. Because I think it always has to have a kind of cake and eat it motive, whereby somehow you spend more time with your family and you get richer in the commercial world. And I don't know that that is the case.
Yes.
And I'd be more interested in seeing something where someone gives up the path of riches and it just is, they're poorer and they're spending more time with the family. And that also is really hard or stressful. It's when you see that you're not being treated truthfully by the maker of something, that it just seems ridiculous.
Yeah, you think in a sense it's disingenuous, and it's a
Yeah.
kind of mundial deus ex machina, like, you can now for no real reason have both of those things. Now, I would say, Richard, that what
it's probably not a great pitch for the book.
No, it's not, because I'll read it because you're incapable of promoting your own work. It says here, look, Stephen Fry has said it's a work of shimmering genius, and Caitlin Moran has said it's hilarious, but she was talking... Both of these people are talking about previous books
This
that
one's
you've already written.
Turkey.
But nonetheless, these both of these remarks seem to indicate your amount of talent. I'm so sorry it's so hot in here.
No,
the only way
fine.
to cope, shut down.
Okay, yes.
Shut down.
Good. It does look like I'm under investigation. But, I will shut down. But I'm trying to think of a better way to sort of talk about what bugged me, because it seems so trivial.
No, it doesn't. I've got some points I would like to make. They won't take long.
No, I'd love it.
You know
if
me,
it took
I'm
a lot
a
of
succinct
time.
man.
Please, don't force me into a compliment.
Here we go. What it is if you... I'm not suggesting this in a conspiratorial or even deliberate or conscious way, but if you question what are the motives of the mainstream film industry, perhaps from a, say, post-structuralist perspective, what is the function? And if the function is that they are a kind of a palliative, a kind of dumb, soothing force, even sort of great blockbuster works of pop art, still ultimately deeply formulaic, and that doesn't mean they don't occasionally touch on truth, like great superhero movies or franchise movies or whatever.
Star Wars is a weird film and very specific. Like the first one is, that's clearly the work of a slightly strange chap.
Yeah, would you? We'll investigate that a little bit in a second. But what I reckon, Richard, is that what you are observing and breaking down is that sort of inhered within works of this nature is a kind of lumpen clumsiness, and that there, in my opinion, there might be something quite malevolent about it if you regard it politically for a moment. That message of, you like, even that sense of distinction, that this is for you, and these are the lives you should aspire to, and these are the stories that are fit for you. It's a sort of, it's an enforcing a very I would say low level, dumb and bludgeoned kind of state in the audience. I think it shows and the disregard for the audience is present in the motivating ideals of the film and in the way it's rendered in the case.
I think so. But also how it can be done by quite casually, that you can drift into doing that, and it's not to say that somehow I'm outside of that and being somehow able to critique and go, oh, you haven't achieved your artistic potential here. But it's more, there's more something about it that just feels that unless you feel the audience is far more intelligent than you're just wrong. You were just factually wrong. Billy Wilder said this thing, that individually the audience may not be brilliant, but together they're a genius. And I think there is that. There's something... Audiences know if they're being cheated or if they're being condescended to. And so it just seems very it's very fun to see something. It's why people like watching those ads where like the boss of the company decides to sell carpets. So you just go, I know what's happened here. You've said, it's fine, I'll handle it. I'll handle it. I am carpet right. But you know, you didn't get the best person to do this. You made a mistake, and everyone can feel it. So there's something just silly about feeling, oh, well, the audience will buy this, or the audience will take this. The audience always knows more, I think, than you. I mean, there's just more of them, for a start, and they're just responding in real time. They don't have all of your baggage. They're not deluding themselves about whether this is interesting or not. They have all of these advantages over you.